You start a new semester thinking it's just the usual grind, deadlines piling up, seminars that keep you on edge, late nights in the lab with nothing but cold coffee for company. And then, out of nowhere, in just a few months, 4 people around you are gone. Not transfers, not dropouts. Gone because they took their own lives. I am a college student, a PhD candidate, a postdoc, even a professor. You're shocked, you're scared, and you keep asking yourself, what the hell is happening here? Why isn't anybody talking about it? That's exactly what happened at UC Berkeley back in 2013-2014. 4 suicides in one department. The whole community was reeling. But instead of open conversations, what we got was silence. Emails, condolences, whispers in the hallway, and then everyone went back to work like nothing happened. But here's the thing, it wasn't nothing. The pressure, the isolation, the weight of academia, it was crushing people. And the truth is, it still is. This is the story I want to share with you, not just about the lives we lost, but about the deeper truth we keep ignoring. Knowledge isn't just books, degrees, or research papers. It's people, it's my mind. It's fragile, human lives. My name's Wendy Ingram. I'm 37 now, but back then I was just another grad student in molecular and cell biology at UC Berkeley. Most of my days were spent in the lab messing with Toxoplasma gondii, this tiny parasite that can literally rewire the brain. We used to joke that infected mice would lose their fear of cats, but deep down, I knew it wasn't funny. It was wild and a little scary how something so small could hijack an entire nervous system. The irony, while I was studying how a parasite could mess with the brain, my own brain was slipping under a different kind of pressure. That year, we lost 4 people in our department to suicide. 4. A student, a PhD, a postdoc, and even a professor. And suddenly I started looking around the hallways at my classmates, my mentors, myself, and I could see it. Everyone was struggling with something. Some people were drowning in anxiety. Others were stuck in depression so heavy you could see it in their eyes. Most of us were just exhausted, running on fumes, trying to hold it together. But here's the thing, nobody talked about it. Not once. We just kept showing up like everything was fine. Perfect slides at lab meetings, papers graded on time, posters polished for conferences. Meanwhile, I knew people having panic attacks in the bathroom stall. I knew folks crying over stacks of essays before wiping their faces and walking back into class like nothing happened. And I knew because I was one of them. I'd already gone to therapy, sat in that chair wondering, if my brain is my main tool, what does it mean if it's breaking down? In academia, you're not just doing a job, your brain is your entire identity. And when it starts to crack, you don't just worry about your health, you worry about your future, your career, your credibility. That's the unspoken rule. You can do groundbreaking research, but don't you dare admit your mind is struggling. So we learn to hide it. Anxiety behind closed office doors. Sleepless nights buried under too much coffee. Depression tucked behind fake smiles and quick "I'm fine" replies. On the outside, we looked like the next generation of scientists. On the inside, we were bleeding quietly, alone. And that's when it hit me. The real danger wasn't just the work or the burnout. It was the silence. The silence was killing us. Then it got worse. A couple years later, one of my closest friends from Berkeley, Chris Alvaro, was doing a postdoc at UCSF. Brilliant, kind, endlessly creative. They mentored younger students, showed up to lab meetings with fresh ideas, and somehow still had the energy to crack jokes in the hallway. To everyone else, Chris looked like they had it all together. Looking back, maybe there were signs days when they were quieter than usual, moments when their smile felt a little forced, like it never quite reached their eyes, but nothing that screamed out for help, nothing that prepared us for what came next. And then one day, they were gone. Suicide. I remember staring at my phone when I got the news. My stomach dropped like I'd swallowed a stone. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. I just kept whispering, no, not Chris, not them, not like this. The shock wasn't just losing a friend. It was realizing that someone so brilliant, so giving, could be suffering so deeply right in front of us, and we never knew. And underneath that shock came a question that hit like a freight train. How many more? How many more brilliant minds? How many more friends? How many more students were going to slip away in silence because we were all too afraid to say the words out loud? That was my breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending. So at the next departmental retreat, when they asked me to speak, I didn't bring polished slides or data charts. I didn't talk about toxoplasma or publications or any of the things that usually prove your worth in academia. I told the truth. I told them about therapy, about the pills I tried to calm my panic attacks, about the mornings I couldn't get out of bed. I said the words most of us had been choking on: anxiety, depression, burnout. I told them it was real, and it was nothing to be ashamed of. And for the first time, the silence cracked. I looked out into that room, and I saw people crying. Professors, students, postdocs, all with tears in their eyes. And one by one, afterward, they came up to me and whispered, "Me too. I've been struggling too." That moment changed everything, because I realized we weren't alone. We had just been suffering alone. And the second we broke the silence, something shifted. The room didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt human. After that retreat, I knew silence wasn't an option anymore. But just telling my own story, it didn't feel like enough. Then I thought of Chris. Before they passed, Chris had this tattoo of a dragonfly on their wrist. They used to joke that dragonflies were survivors. They start their life underwater, crawl through the mud, and somehow, one day, they break through the surface and fly. That image stuck with me, and I thought maybe that's what we need. A space where people like us students, postdocs, professors can come up for air. A place where we don't have to hide the fact that we struggle. That's how Dragonfly Mental Health was born. At first, it was just conversations, small circles, a video here, a workshop there. I invited people to share, honestly, about what they'd been through. Panic attacks before lectures. Depression so heavy, it made writing impossible. Anxiety that kept them awake for nights on end. And then something incredible happened. The people I admired, most the ones I thought had it all figured out, started opening up too. Professors I'd looked up to for years admitted they'd battled depression. A Nobel Prize winner shared how panic attacks nearly derailed his early career. Another faculty member talked about how medication saved her life. Hearing those voices, those giants in our field say out loud what so many of us had been whispering in the dark, it changed the room. Because suddenly, this wasn't just my story or your story. It was our story. And you could see it in people's faces. The relief, the tears, that realization that the pain we carry in academia isn't a personal flaw. It's part of the culture we've been forced to swallow in silence. For the first time, people weren't just surviving alone in their labs, pretending everything was fine. They were connecting. They were saying, if they can talk about it, maybe I can too. That's when it clicked for me. When the people we respect most tell the truth, it gives the rest of us permission to be human. And in a world that worships perfection, that permission might just save lives. Not long after Dragonfly started putting out those films and workshops, I began to notice something shifting. Students who used to stay silent in the back row were raising their hands, saying, "I've been there too." Postdocs who looked like they had it all together admitted they were barely hanging on. Even professors, people we all admired, started speaking honestly about their own panic attacks, sleepless nights, or the years they spent on antidepressants. And little by little, the culture changed. Instead of hiding, people began seeking help. Instead of whispering in the hallways, they walked each other to the counseling center. Instead of drowning alone, they started leaning on one another. I'll never forget one student who came up to me after a workshop and said, "Last month I was ready to quit. I thought I was the only one falling apart. But today I realized I'm not broken. I'm human." That's when I knew this wasn't just about my story, or even Chris's story. It was about building a community where silence no longer had the last word. And it grew faster than I ever imagined. Dragonfly went from one department retreat at Berkeley to reaching tens of thousands of academics around the world. Videos, workshops, peer support groups spanning more than 30 countries. The message was simple, but powerful. You're not alone. And science backs this up. We know from psychiatric research that social connection is one of the strongest protective factors against depression and suicide. Stigma, on the other hand, is lethal. It keeps people from seeking help until it's too late. When someone you respect says, "I struggle too," the stigma cracks, and that crack lets the light in. Because here's the truth. Silence can kill, but one honest conversation can save a life. So no, living positively doesn't mean the storm disappears. It just means you've built enough shelter, enough community, enough hope to stand steady until the clouds pass. And for me, that's the biggest lesson. We don't have to fight these battles alone. If you're feeling burned out, anxious, or just plain empty, hear me when I say this. Nobody's asking you to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. The simple act of speaking up, of saying I'm struggling, that's already half the battle. That's the first step out of the dark. So I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Share your story, the messy parts, the real parts, because your voice might be exactly what someone else out there needs to keep going tonight. And if this resonated with you, I invite you to stick around here. At The Truth MD, this is where we strip away the polished mask, tell the truth about pain, burnout, depression, anxiety, and more importantly, how we find our way back, together. Because at the end of the day, knowledge isn't just about research or degrees or publications. True wisdom is knowing that we're stronger when we choose not to suffer in silence. So, what's your story? What moment cracked the silence for you?